Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Canal Algérie's Nightly News. On to the headlines. The PNA pilot Lieutenant Bekoush Nasser passes away in a crash, and the President of the Republic, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, National Defense Minister extend a condolences message to the late's family. The Algerian-Tunisian relations are in the limelight to develop border areas and combat organized crimes. And the Paris Grand Mosque holds a collective iftar, bringing together the two sides' diplomats amid a serious diplomatic crisis between the two capitals. Welcome back. First off, following the martyrdom of pilot Lieutenant Colonel Bekoush Nasser in the crash of a military combat aircraft during a planned training fight this Wednesday near the Awlef region in the province of Adrar in the 3rd Military Region. And in this painful ordeal, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, offers his sincere condolences to the martyr's family and to the People's National Army, assuring them of his deep compassion and praying to Almighty Allah in this blessed month, these blessed days of the holy month, to surround the deceased with his holy mercy, to welcome him into his vast paradise, and to grant patience and comfort to his loved ones. To Allah we belong, and to him we shall return, concluded the messages of condolences. For his part, the Army General Said Chingriha, Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the PNA, also offers on his behalf and on behalf of all members of the PNA his sincere condolences and deep compassion to the martyr's family and loved ones. He prays to Allah Almighty to grant them patience and comfort and to surround the deceased with his vast mercy. A tragic accident following which the Army General has ordered the opening of an investigation to determine the causes and circumstances of this tragedy. In other news, to celebrate the 63rd anniversary of Victory Day, the Minister of War Veterans and Rights Holders, Laider Biga, accompanied by the Wali, or Governor of Algiers, and members of the revolutionary family, oversaw the official celebrations of the anniversary. He laid a wreath at the memorial in this Resistance Square in the central municipality of Algiers and recited the Fatiha for the souls of the martyrs of the Liberation Revolution. During the celebration, the Minister of War Veterans affirmed that Algeria is committed to preserving the message of the martyrs and passing it on to younger generations. The Premier Nadir Al-Arbawi chaired a government meeting today to study a preliminary bill defining the general rules related to electronic services and transactions and electronic tariffs. This law aims to improve the legal framework for electronic certification in a way that allows for the establishment of reliable digital services and strengthens national digital sovereignty. On the other hand, the government listened to a presentation of the preparations for the project to launch 5th-generation mobile phone networks as an important tributary to economic and industrial development in Algeria. The government also listened to a presentation on the evaluation of the implementation of the National Youth Plan for 2020-2024, as well as the prospects for preparing the new National Youth Plan for the period 2025-2029 within the framework of a participatory and multi-sectoral approach aimed at promoting public policy directed at young people in implementation of the directives of the President of the Republic. And as part of the following up on the implementation of the President's commitment regarding the establishment of emergency hospitals and the improvement of the quality of necessary health services. As part of monitoring the fight against locusts, the government listened to a presentation on the situation of locust infestations in some border areas in the south of the country and the measures taken to activate the prevention mechanism for this phenomenon. The Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi chaired today the 194th session of the State Contribution Council, which was devoted to the transfer of real estate assets and liabilities of the public economic enterprise Divendes Zone Industrial to the benefit of the National Agency for Industrial Property. This meeting is being held in implementation of the provisions of Article 31 of Executive Decree number 488/23, establishing, organizing, and operating the National Agency for Industrial Property. This process will allow the new agency to effectively enter into operation and begin carrying out its assigned tasks in the field of developing and managing industrial zones and activity zones. The state's private property, in addition to strengthening the industrial real estate supply geared towards investment, allows for the renewed impetus to efforts to support and promote investment within the framework of the new economic real estate system established by the President of the Republic. In other news, the enlarged bilateral meeting between the Minister of Interior, Local Collectivities and Territory Planning, Brahim Murad, and his Tunisian counterpart Khalid Nouri began today in Algiers in the presence of heads of security forces from both countries. Taking place at the Abdulatif Rahal International Conference Center, this meeting provides an opportunity to assess the two ministerial departments and the level of security and operational coordination between the various security forces. The Grand Mosque of Paris held a collective iftar where several diplomats were present to break fasting, an event that takes place amid a serious diplomatic crisis between the two countries. More details with Afaf Belhouched and Salim Mirah.
In an atmosphere fraught with unprecedented diplomatic tensions between Algiers and Paris, that the diplomatic iftar or collective meal at the Grand Mosque of Paris took place last night, a ritual now embedded in the agenda of Ramadan for 4 years, but this time it resonated differently. This tense climate was highlighted by the head of the French diplomacy, who seized this opportunity to affirm France's commitment to its relations with Algeria. Aggressive rhetoric of the French government. On the contrary, Algeria is asking to go through the legal channels to allow cooperation between the consulates and the authorities and to assess cases individually to uphold the rights of citizens, whether they are documented or not, whether they are subject to expulsion or not. I believe that there is a procedure to be followed, and that is what Algeria is emphasizing. Speaking of escalation, one might think that Algeria was aggressive, but all it did was issue a statement reminding everyone of the rules. The process had to go through the authorities and consulates, so they simply reiterated how things were supposed to work. If some now want to change the rule just because people have rights, well, this is exactly the point. Being undocumented doesn't mean you have no rights. Amid this crisis, the Grand Mosque of Paris found itself accused of certain political and media circles of being merely an extension of Algiers. It strongly affirmed its independence. The Paris Grand Mosque has a particular story in which there has been a lot of support. It is a place from where Islam spread to France. It is an evolution of what it has been and what it must be. Clarification that doesn't put tensions between calls for calm and threats of sanctions and uncertainty remains. Many denounce the use of French-Algerian relations as a tool of campaign led by the Republican right in quest of more valid arguments.
Coming up in our news edition. Tension is mounting between Algiers and Paris over the expulsion of Algerian nationals, and Algeria denounces the use of this file for political purposes. As we've mentioned, Algeria accuses France of politicizing expulsions and insists on respecting bilateral agreements as restrictive measures fuel tensions. Menen Maafa with more details.
For days, tensions between France and Algeria have been mounting over expulsions. French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau has accused Algeria of violating international commitments. However, Algiers insists it acted within its rights by rejecting France's list of deportees, a procedure not outlined in their agreements or long-standing practice. Algeria has condemned France's unilateral measures, citing violations of due process, the use of threats, and disregard for international law. At the heart of the dispute lies consular protection for Algerian nationals in France, a right enshrined in international law and the 1974 Franco-Algerian Consular Convention, an agreement Paris has largely ignored during this crisis. Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau cites the Chicago Convention to pressure Algeria, threatening Algérie for refusing to board deportees without proper documents, despite the convention allowing such refusals. He also restricted entry for Algerian diplomats by passing the 2013 bilateral agreement. As tensions rise, the French Prime Minister seeks a diplomatic approach, emphasizing dialogue and cooperation.
And Far-Right MP Eric Ciotti plans to propose an ending bilateral immigration agreements in June, fueling anti-Algeria rhetoric amid electoral posturing. Menen Maafa again.
Eric Ciotti, a racist and a corrupt politician, this former leader of the right-wing party Les Républicains is entangled in multiple affairs, revealing a clear appetite for public funds, meaning the money of the French people. Among the schemes surrounding the outspoken MP, 3 have made headlines in the French press over the past 2 to 3 years. First, suspicions of illegal campaign financing in 2023. The Nice prosecutor opened an investigation. The previous year, while running for office, Ciotti and some of his associates benefited from free parking at the Nice port, provided by the local Chamber of Commerce. On this matter, a police raid took place last November. Another case, another suspected fraud, social security fraud. The far-right leader's mother occupied a spot in a hospital for 20 years, even though it was reserved for short-term care. The case is serious, involving more than 526,000 euros taken from French social security funds and therefore from the French people. Finally, the National Financial Prosecutor's Office also has a schemer in its sights. His ex-wife held multiple jobs at the same time for 10 years at the National Assembly, the Alps Maritime Department, and in Nice. This is just a small sample of the submerged part of the Ciotti iceberg, shamelessly so. Even though his wrongdoings are in plain sight, ridicule may not kill, but the sluggishness of the French justice system cannot hide such ugly truths.
2 Gaza now, where Zionist attacks carried out yesterday killed 400 Palestinians, resulting in the forced displacement of innocent civilians amid catastrophic humanitarian conditions, as compiled by our correspondent in Gaza, Wissam Abu Zaid, in a report taken up by Min al-Ma'afa.
Amid the darkness, we must shed light on the suffering of Palestinian refugees, forced once again by the Zionist occupation to flee from the northern areas to the city center. I am now displaced from Beit Hanun, living on the streets, on the sidewalk. Honestly, I can't even describe our suffering. We are fasting, but even fasting has become difficult due to the harsh conditions. We tried to move and find shelter, but we found nothing. These Palestinian families who brought some of their basic necessities after being forcibly displaced by the occupation, mattresses, blankets and essential supplies, are now in Gaza City, searching for new shelter. They are setting up tents in the streets and along the roads. At this very moment, Palestinian families are desperately looking for a place to protect them from the cruelty of the Zionist occupation. Isn't this unfair for these innocent children? Don't they have rights like other children in the world do? They are dying of thirst and hunger. These are the harsh conditions this Palestinian mother speaks of as she struggles to care for her child who needs milk and warm water. Yet none of these basic necessities are available. There is nothing to soothe her child's cries or ease the hunger of these children amid the brutal Zionist assault on Palestinian civilians.
Algeria strongly condemns the terrorist attack that targeted the convoy of the President of the Brotherly Federal Republic of Somalia, Mr. Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, in the capital Mogadishu, while Algeria expresses its relief at the safety of President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud and his escape from this cowardly attempt. It extends its sincere condolences to the families of the victims, its sincere wishes for a speedy recovery to all the wounded and injured, based on its bitter experience with the scourge of blind terrorists and its awareness of its destructive aims and objectives. Algeria reaffirms its full solidarity and absolute support for the brotherly Somalia in its efforts to eradicate the scourge and enhance security and stability in the country. As part of strengthening national efforts to ensure the safety and security of maritime navigation, the 30th session of the Maritime Search and Rescue Committee was held yesterday at the headquarters of the Algerian Naval Base at the Admiralty of the 1st Military Region, under the chairmanship of General de Brigade, Commander of the National Coast Guard Ground Service of the Naval Forces Command. During the meeting of this committee, which includes, in addition to the Ministry of National Defense, representatives of several ministries and national agencies, the implementation of the recommended actions of the 29th meeting was reviewed and assessed, as well as the progress made in the field of maritime search and rescue, the program of activities related to search and rescue system in Algeria. On to the operational report of the People's National Army's activity in the past week. In the context of the fight against terrorism, 4 terrorists surrounded to the military authorities of Burj Baji Mukhtar in the 6th military region. These terrorists, active in the Sahel region, were in possession of 4 Kalashnikov submachine guns, a quantity of ammunition and other items, while detachments of the PNA arrested 14 support elements to terrorist groups during separate operations across the national territory. In the framework of the fight against organized crime and the continuation of the tireless efforts aimed at countering the scourge of drug trafficking in our country, combined detachments of the PNA intercepted, in coordination with the different security services, in operations across the military regions, 41 drug traffickers in averted attempts to introduce 30 quintals and 58 kilograms of processed keef through the borders with Morocco, while 720,548 psychotropic tablets were seized. In Tamaras, Burj Baji Mukhtar, in Saleh and Elizi, detachments of the People's National Army arrested 350 individuals and seized 40 vehicles, 179 generators, 118 jackhammers, as well as quantities of mixture of raw gold and stones, explosives, detonation tools, and other equipment used in illegal gold mining operations. On the other hand, 21 other individuals are arrested, 1 automatic pistol, 7 hunting rifles, 14,965 liters of fuel, as well as 87 quintals of tobacco and 6 tons of foodstuffs intended for smuggling and speculation were seized during separate operations across military regions. Similarly, 373 illegal immigrants of different nationalities were arrested across the national territory. Sports now. The national football team is getting ready for the upcoming game versus Botswana as part of the 2026 World Cup qualifiers. The national squad held today a training session in Gabon before heading to Francistown, where the official game will take place. All the best for the Desert Warriors. And with that, we end tonight's bulletin. Thank you for watching. Sahas Harkum.